an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Elder Empire C Book 1, Chapters 14, 15, and 16. In these chapters, for reasons that I still don't really understand, Naberius is tapped to be the next emperor, and he wants to kill Calder, which I can sympathize with. However, what are we doing? Naberius? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to George for commissioning this episode. Guys, you know what I just realized as I was making that intro about how ridiculous it is that they just pick a guy because he's a reader and has a bunch of money. All of a sudden it occurred to me that I, as a U.S. citizen, should not be casting aspersions on the reasoning behind selecting certain individuals as leaders. Because we don't have the best track record, man. We have had far fewer compelling reasons for our picks in the past. So you know what? I retract everything I said. Fine. Naberius makes perfect sense. Let's go with that. Sure. I guess. I hate it. But fine. I guess. So, let's start talking about the chapter from the start. Which, chapter 14 starts with such a great line. Every time Calder saw Cheska Bennet, her hat got bigger. I'll tell you what, that'd be a good, opening line for a novel. Frankly. That's very compelling stuff. You want to know how often he sees her? You want to know what she's like? You want to know what her hat looks like? What his opinion is of said hat? It draws you in, man. It's a good sentence. This time, it was a dark blue two-cornered hat. And when it said two-cornered, for a second I was like, what? And then I realized, is that an admiral's hat? Like Napoleon's hat? I always picture Napoleon wearing one of those hats. And she is dressed up. She's got a blue outfit trimmed in gold. Her hair is combed and styled. She's got ornaments in her hair. And Calder is like, wow, did I get an invite to the ball? And she does this mock curtsy. And tells him that there's an emergency meeting of the powers that be. And Naberius should have told him about this. And she doesn't seem like... It's more like, I'm puzzled that he didn't tell you, but not alarmed that he didn't tell you. I feel like this is our first indication at how much Naberius is trying to keep Calder on the outside. And, we find out later when we are in his champion's head that Calder didn't tell anybody about what Naberius did about killing his own Silent One. So I'm going to assume that extends to everybody. That it wasn't just Urziah he didn't tell. Which I find interesting because I feel like that has to suggest either that Calder doesn't want them knowing that they are working with somebody who is so... What's the word I want? I mean... is so treacherous, I guess, really, is the word. Or is he afraid of what they'll do if they find out? Does he think they'll quit? And when I realized that he had been, not told about this meeting, I sort of was wondering at this point already, what is his problem with Calder? He let him see him do something that he has to know Calder and other people would also have a problem with. Does that mean that he's just not really worried about Calder And why is that? And anytime somebody behaves as if they're not worried about somebody that I think they should be, it either means they've got a real ace in the hole that they're not telling you about, or they don't expect that person to really be around much longer. So, yeah, this was my bit of an inkling in my head. I was like, that feels like he's being cut out very specifically. So he heads in with Cheska, and on the way, Cheska says something about how she's sorry that Jerry couldn't be here, and he just straight up doesn't want to talk about it. It's not until later on in these chapters that Bliss makes a couple of statements that give him a lot of hope back that Jerry is still alive. And let's see. So he begs her to tell him some of what's going on, and she will not tell him. It's too much fun letting you stew. So, back on the Testament, Calder dug through his chest of clothes, wincing as he knelt without thinking on his wounded leg. Relatable. He finds his Black Watch coat, and we get this moment where he sort of wishes that he was still a part of things. And it was interesting to me because I don't feel like I paused quite long enough to give thought to what was going on with him being clearly not part of them anymore, but being still sort of respected by some people from the Black Watch. And once we find out what happens with his father, I think I have an idea what it is, but we will get there. Just wanted to mention for the chat, if somebody will comment just to let me know that the chat's working, because again, I have had issues with that before. It doesn't seem to happen quite as often now that I have to go to Safari instead of Chrome to use it, but can never be too careful. So he's going through this and he's looking for, he finds his Black Watch coat and is thinking about how he sort of would wear this not just because it's one of the more decent pieces of clothing that he owns, but also because he clearly misses that life. And he runs across this beautiful emerald green silk. And all of a sudden, he realizes that Jerry hadn't abandoned him because she had planned to abandon him. She still had things in place that she was doing to, she was trying to enjoy their future. She had ideas for things to be done, and she wasn't planning on not being around. And it just really washes over him at this point. There's just so much, there's so many misgivings. I mean, I have not personally been in this position. I often say, if I've ever been cheated on, I didn't find out about it. I don't know if I ever have been. Probably I have, and I just, don't know, and that's fine. But I often wonder what it's like to look back at moments and recontextualize everything with new information if you find out that somebody has been sneaking around behind your back. And that's the only comparison that I can really make here that a lot of people will relate to with what Jerry is doing. And the thing here is that he knows that she was lying to him, but she still had intended to stay with him. And in a way that was enough. It seems like he would have preferred to go on not knowing, but at least have her in his life. And I really wonder about that, if there are times, because I maintain, as much as I want to say honesty is best, and I understand how black and white that can feel, there are times where I think somebody confesses to a thing due to their own guilt, and it won't actually do any good. It will be a rupture in a relationship that will potentially cause the other person more pain. And it's hard to know if you're rationalizing just keeping shit to yourself because you don't want to be the bad guy, or if you are inflicting your pain on somebody else because you are having trouble dealing with the consequences of your own actions and you feel like you need to put that somewhere and potentially put it on somebody who doesn't deserve it. And I really wonder, like, when he sees her again, what it's going to be like. I just don't know. Based on what we have seen of his encounters on the Grey Island, I don't feel like there was enough time for any substantial explanation. And I think she's the one who runs off with the heart at the end, because it just disappears. And I just don't... It's one thing for her to have abandoned him in the midst of a fight, not intending to, but you do find out she was lying, so there was an element of something there. And then you come and rescue her, and maybe she bails again, taking the thing with her. Now this is a different story. It's a choice in a way that it wasn't before. I don't know what he'll do. So this is when Andal comes in. And there's an interesting moment here. We find out, first of all, that Calder knows practically nothing about Andal's past. And he tells Calder, I had a woman I was close to once, not a wife. She died. Imperial troops pacifying a rebellious city quarter. I was a Luminian pilgrim at the time, so I could have stopped it, but I got home 6 minutes too late. 6 minutes, Calder, just in time to clean up the blood. That's how I ended up where I am, and this is my way of saying that I know where you are. If time doesn't heal wounds, it certainly makes them hurt less. Calder asks, what about revenge? Does that help? And Andal says, I blamed him for years. But when I heard he was dead, it didn't help at all. I doubt yours will help either. This is one of those that I get mixed reports on. Like, revenge is not something most people get to indulge in. It's just not. Like, you can do petty things, but usually if you're deeply wronged, there is not a lot most people are willing to risk in order to get somebody back in kind at the sort of level they've been wronged initially, you know? Or maybe just simply not an ability to do so. And so I've only talked to a couple of people who managed anything like, and one of them said it did, and another said it did not. Help, that is. So I often think about that. I feel like for me, it would help, because I am just so, like, I'm a Libra. I like the balance. I like the scales. I like to feel that there is some sort of symmetry and, retribution for consequences, karma, if you want to call it that. I think it would help. But I don't know. I really don't. And this whole thing with Andal and talking about how he was a Luminian pilgrim, so he could have stopped it. Why does that mean he could have stopped it? We don't know anything about this whole history here. And the fact that he blames the Emperor specifically for her death the way that he does, what does that mean? What caused, is this a group of people that the Emperor was targeting specifically? It sounds like that based on the way he says this. So Calder is thinking about Shera, excuse me, and he is really struggling the most with not just the fact that Shera is responsible for this, even though, technically it's not really her, it's the consultants. But he finds it really appalling. First of all, the sort of coldness in Shera, which we know she has to actively engage in lately, that makes it seem as if she just didn't care if somebody lives or dies. It's all about whether they're in her way. And the fact that it's just, there's no rationalization to that for him. Like, he can't intellectually understand what a person who sees the world like that is like. And that is part of what's difficult for him, is failing to make sense of any of this, which I can also really understand. That's part of me wanting revenge in order to balance the scales, is it gives you a feeling of control, you know? And it may be an illusion, but most of our senses of control are illusions, and I know that, and I just reach for them anyway. It's just kind of how I roll. And Andal says we should not have let Naberius on the ship. I'm not blaming you or me. We were both suspicious, but we, looking back, should have known. And Andal says, it's not too late. I've been talking to the crew of the Eternal, and they told me what's happening. A meeting between you, Captain Bennet, Naberius, and his sponsors. Let's be done with him. Negotiate a partial fee, leave Naberius with Captain Bennet, and we'll be on our way. And this is the kind of thing, looking back, I wonder what everyone thinks would have happened if he had taken Andal's advice. There are pivotal moments like this. I'm rereading Song of Ice and Fire and doing a podcast on that with Rashawn, one of my most popular co-hosts and my best friend. And there are moments like this with Ned Stark where he gets an out that he chooses not to take. And you can't help but think, what would have happened? Would things have gone differently? Or are people so who they are that even if certain details were changed, everything would have wound up on the same track anyway? And I wonder about this, if they had just tried to negotiate a partial fee, I have to assume Naberius had already made up his mind that he wanted Calder dead at this point, right? So it wouldn't matter. I wish that they could have just left. It doesn't look like they're getting paid either way, so they may as well. So this is when it says, he glanced at the box underneath the bed. It remained untouched, the secret card up his sleeve. Is that the key that opens everything that he's thinking about? I just want to be sure that I'm on the same page. Literally and figuratively, lol. Because that was sort of how I took this, but I wasn't really sure how this was going to help the larger issue that was happening here. I don't know. He rose to his feet, pulling a coat out of the chest. Anything would do. It wasn't what he wore that would make an impression, but the way he acted. And he says to Andal, it's not just about money. He's involved in something as big as the Empire itself. I'd be a fool if I just didn't get involved. And he tells Andal, I want you to come with me, which he didn't get permission for, isn't probably completely allowed, but they're just doing it anyway. And he says, you know where I'm heading, Andal, in the end? I do. Andal's eyes took on a haunted cast. I don't know that I could forget. And are you still with me? To the end, sir. Is he talking about the Grey Island? Or I feel like this is about something else. I feel like this is a different thing. I don't know. Anyway, okay. So they go into the meeting, and it is all of the guild heads. And he was not expecting all of these high-ranking people. Let's see, Jarla's Teach, and he says something about her horrible sword over one shoulder. He didn't let his eyes rest on the black hilt for too long, lest he spoil everyone's formal dress with a spray of vomit. Word? What is up with that? A bitch wants to know. All of these creepy weapons. Mackendy Maxius, one of the most prominent instructors at the capital's Imperial Academy, the head of the Magisters Guild, inclined his mask forward to regard Calder. And Calder tries to get a read on this dude, and he gets absolutely nothing. And it's a bit of a reminder to Calder that he is used to being the most talented reader in a room. But he is, this dude is out of his league. This is a whole different ballgame. So the fourth guild head was, of course, Bliss. And she is so odd, you guys. So I found her incredibly intimidating in the first meeting that we have. And don't get me wrong, she is still intimidating. I am no fool. However, it felt like she was sort of... It felt like almost to a point that her behavior in that scene was calculated to be as unnerving as possible. And reading her character in these chapters made me really feel like that was not calculated. That is how she is. She is simply somebody who throws you off because she doesn't behave the way you would expect. She's got strong Luna Lovegood vibes for me. Like if Luna Lovegood, went bad, went a little bit more bonkers than we expected, than she already was. And so we have like moments in this where she's like under the table. I don't know why. There's something that like sort of snakes up inside of her outfit and she has to like push it down sort of. Let's see, something inside the coat squirmed and she pushed it down absently. What the fuck is that? There's a lot I want to know. I mean, it's something to do with an elder because that is how she had the abilities, I'm assuming, that she displayed in that tea room. But is it an actual, like, spawn that she's, like, got in her clothing? Like, what? I kind of don't want to know. I kind of don't. So, this is when Bliss just blurts out, "I'm pleased to see you again. I hear your wife has been kidnapped or possibly killed." And he says that he thinks she's dead. And she asks what makes him think that. And he says, Shera said so. To which Bliss is like, did she have a reason to tell you the truth? And he thinks, well, she didn't have a reason to lie. And then he stops and is like, wait, maybe she did have a reason to lie. I might not know what the reason is, but it would make sense if they just don't want to fucking share information with me. Like, why would they want to tell me the truth? And all of a sudden feels this wave of hope. And it's not until later that she tells him about the void transmissions, I think they're called. And she takes it for granted, evidently, in this scene, that he knows about those already. But he doesn't even know what those are. And I don't think that she explains to him in that scene exactly what they are either. But I could be wrong. I was a little bit distracted by whether or not they were about to get attacked in that scene. So some of that dialogue may have been lost on me. So this is when it's mentioned that Calder is formerly of the Black Watch. And I love this so much. The head of the Imperial Guard responded, first, destruction of Imperial property, conspiracy to free prisoners, theft of Emperor's personal belongings, abuse of guild privileges to commit crimes. Cheska gave a low whistle. You know, when you hear it all spelled out like that, it's actually pretty impressive. Jarlus teaches expression got, if possible, even colder. Oh, Jarlus. Get over yourself. You suck, boo. So, Naberius calls them all to order. Maxius is talking about the fate of the heart of Nikothi if they do not catch up with it quickly, and they're wondering what the consultants could possibly want with it. And the assumption is immediately that they will destroy it. And I believe it's Bliss, or perhaps it's I'm not sure who it is. I'm trying to find the spot because somebody says essentially that the consultants will love if the entire... Here it is. It is Bliss. The consultants prosper in wartime, so it stands to reason that their goals will be different. And I thought this was interesting because I expected Calder to bring up the fact that Urziah can track Shera. Or not Shera. Maya is the one whose blood he tasted. He does not. He keeps it to himself, which turns out to be a really smart move. But in the moment, I was a little bit surprised. And he gives it, it says, when you had the highest card at the table, it was best to keep it close as long as you could. And I really feel like this is a moment where Calder demonstrates a presence of mind that I could probably learn to benefit from. I have this unfortunate assumption that I go into a lot of situations with, that me and everybody here, we're all on the same side. We all want the same things. We're all interested in doing this thing together and it being as efficient as possible for the sake of everyone. And I cannot tell you how many times that sort of attitude has bitten me in the ass. And I don't mean just like, oh, I let myself be open and vulnerable and somebody stabbed me in the back. No, I have like blurted things out that I thought were going to do good in the situation. And I wound up getting somebody else in trouble because I didn't realize they weren't telling other people everything that they were doing in regard to like a project. And I didn't mean to, but I fucked them over. And so this whole keep your mouth shut thing is something I could fucking learn from. But I just often think, well, let's put all of our cards on the table and we'll get the most efficient, beneficial solution because we have all of the information. And I forget, like, as lovely as that would be, it's not often how things work. So just props to Calder for being like, thanks, Dad. I'm going to take your advice and keep that shit to myself. He is correct. So this is, let's see, how long would it take you to awaken and bond the heart? Somebody asks Naberius. And Naberius says, I began the process on the island, and I believe I can do it very quickly. 1 hour, maybe 2. This heart seemed to conform itself to my intent. It could be due to personal compatibility, or due to my own long proximity to the Emperor. Jarla's Teach rolled her eyes, but said nothing. I found that interesting. I'm assuming that Teach thinks that he's just sort of puffing himself up here. It's almost as though the heart was made to bond with a human. Bliss's stretch of bench was empty, and her voice came from under the table. Or perhaps it wants to be bonded. The table fell quiet at that, but Calder couldn't stay silent. So this is when Calder just blurts out, you want this guy to bond with it? And Naberius seems flattered that Calder is like taking it this way, which I still don't really get. It says, as though Calder's doubt was the exact reaction he'd hoped for. I guess that this is because at this point, I'm assuming Naberius has already decided that he's going to want to get Calder got, right? So maybe the fact that Calder expresses this kind of disbelief, it's satisfying to Naberius because it will give some credence to his like alleged motivations here. And so he feels like, yeah, he can point to this and be like, see, this guy clearly sees me as a rival. Look at the attitude he just had. Of course we need to take him out. Otherwise, I don't really know what it could be. And Maxius says he has potential to bond to the heart, and it was difficult for us to find anyone qualified to take the position. No one wants the job. And Calder is shocked at the fact that no one wants to be emperor. But I gotta be honest, it seems like a pretty garbage job. And if you have to bond with a heart, I think other people are showing some really great foresight in seeing how like deeply uncomfortable and potentially shattering that would be. And I was surprised that Calder was so surprised. But yeah, it says the regents have refused the position. If something is not done soon, the entire empire will tear itself to pieces. He's got friends in every guild. He's a reader. He knows how the government works from personal experience. He has lots and lots of money. Easy choice, if you're asking me. And this is when it's brought up, that the consultants would prefer no emperor. Teach says this part. A world of anarchy must look like a haven for a band of spies and assassins. Calder will take Naberius and head straight for the Grey Island, where he will wait for orders in case we find the heart elsewhere. And they ask why Calder, and it's because he has the fastest ship. And what Calder... The thing that I'm sort of confused by here is that Naberius plans to kill Calder and then take the ship. But if you kill Calder, I have to... I don't know if this is because Calder says I can continue in a straight line regardless of wind or tide. Is that because of the Elder strapped to the hull? Or is that because Calder is soulbound to the ship? Is it a combo? I am just of the assumption that were Naberius to successfully kill Calder, I can't imagine that he would get the same sort of performance out of the ship that Calder is getting. And I find it weird that that's not seeming to occur to him or be a concern at all. So then we go to chapter 15, which starts off, most of these start off with a series of like paragraphs, usually, from letters written to Calder by his various teachers that he has had over the years. And this one is, I beg you do not attempt to awaken anything without the direct supervision of myself or your mother. Which part of me feels like Calder, maybe he has learned that he is out of his depth sometimes in a way that he needs to listen. And part of me is like, he definitely went ahead and just did that, didn't he? So, Calder is in the reception room of Candle Bay Imperial Prison. And I gotta tell you guys, this woman, I knew something was up with her within like 2 sentences, and I wondered if she was an android or something, genuinely. You know, I don't know what is possible in this universe. There are still many things that we have yet to learn about in the lore and the magical systems and whatnot. The way she behaved, it was so robotic that it just got me going, all right, what's happening here? Something is up. And he is so immediately antagonistic to her and seems to really think that she just has this implacable personality that can't be shaken. But every sentence of this dialogue made me more and more uneasy. So that by the time he gets to his father, I was really worried because I had a feeling, not necessarily, I didn't think his dad would have been, turned into a fucking robot or anything. But I was like, what if just what if, So he goes in to see his dad. What got me especially is she tells him at 3:00 you can see him. It's 2 minutes till 3. And she gets up at the stroke of 3, which was another thing. I was just like, that's automated. She's like an iPhone. What is happening here? She handed him a beaten copper bell. I will come to collect you at 4:00. If you wish to depart before that time, or if you notice any unusual behavior in the prisoner, please ring that bell. A member of the facility staff will come to assist you as quickly as possible. So, he sees his dad, and at first, he's like, well, damn. Because the room has a desk, a nice bed. He's got comforts in a way that Calder wasn't expecting, and he personally looks healthy. And Calder asks, how are they treating you here? Roderick chuckled. Oh, better than okay. Regular meals, plenty to read, excellent medical care. I feel better than I have in my entire life. Calder relaxed. Suddenly, the whole plan to break him out of prison seemed silly, like a child's game. When the receptionist had turned him away so many times, he'd invented dark and ominous reasons. The whole time his father had been up here reading and exercising. So, Calder tells him I've been living with Mother. His dad doesn't seem surprised, and I was like, okay, either there's two reasons for not being surprised. Because I'm already suspicious because of this receptionist. A, he's not surprised because somebody told him already. Unlikely. Nobody's going to bother. Why would they tell him anything? There's no reason for anybody to keep him informed about what's going on with him. Or B, he doesn't experience surprise. He won't be upset ever again. Because there's a sense of just evenness to his external emotional state that's very, very creepy. So this is when he tells his father that he's with the Black Watch, and he had been dreading telling his dad that. And Roderick has a great reaction. Such good news. You've got such a promising career at such a young age. You'll be able to serve the Emperor, the light and life of our empire. You approve, then? Of course! A good steady income and a chance to serve the Emperor is all I could want for my son. Something was wrong here. Were they being watched? Was that why his father was playing the good imperial citizen all of a sudden? He lowered his voice just in case. Father, you were the one who said the Empire would be better off eating itself alive than dying slowly under this elder-spawned excuse for a ruler. Roderick chuckled again. That doesn't sound like me. Calder's suspicions bloomed to full-blown alarm. Reaching out to the reading desk, he placed his hand on the stack of books. Roderick is in pain. He's sweating. The walls are closing in and he has to escape. Maybe if he uses the book, he can break the window and leap into the bay. Break, window, break! Calder jerked his hand away, already gasping for breath at the briefest contact. He grabbed the quilt. Roderick twists the quilt in his fists, braiding it into a rope. If he kills himself quickly, they won't be able to hurt him anymore. No more shots, he silently begs. Kill me quickly. And this is when he's like, I saw people jump out the window a few days ago. Why would they do that? Roderick's smile suddenly looked as though it had been painted on as fake as the receptionist's. How should I know, son? If I opened that window, would you jump out? His father froze. You can't open that window, Calder. It doesn't open. It never opens. I'm a reader, remember? I can open it, but only if you want me to. Only if you want to jump out. Do you? Do you want to jump out? Roderick choked out a single word past a frozen, paralyzed smile. Yes. Calder gathered his father into an embrace, fighting back tears. At that moment, if he could have planted an alchemical charge and blown the whole prison to rubble, he would have lit the fuse with a smile on his face. Hesitantly, weakly, Roderick wrapped his arms around his son. What I find interesting here is the fact that they know that Calder is a reader, and they let him in anyway. They had to know that he would touch things, no? I can't tell. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they just expected him to talk to his father and that would be it. I'm surprised that they allow this to happen. Maybe they don't expect him to be able to read that quickly and easily. I don't know. The cell door was locked, but Calder opened it anyway. 2 security guards hurried down the hall as he walked away, but he ignored them and they ran past. He gets to the receptionist, and he asks her, what if I burn this place to the ground? And she says I would be forced to call security. Suddenly, the whole scene twisted in his mind. The smiling receptionist became the receptionist who had to smile. She literally couldn't make any other expression. What did they do to you? He asked. The smile remained strong and steady. "We have excellent medical care at this facility." Calder nodded. He had expected nothing else. It didn't matter, he supposed. If he got to choose, he would leave this prison as nothing more than a hole in the ground. It didn't deserve to exist. So, earlier when I was talking about the reaction that Calder got when he reached the island and the Black Watch people said that he was on the right side, my assumption is that either it is an open secret or he spreads the knowledge of what's happening here. And they all are equally horrified and agree that this should not be the way it is. But there isn't a way to stop it. Maybe they don't have the power. I don't know. The thing about what's going on here right now is that the Emperor still exists. I don't know if, like, the Candle Bay prison continues to operate after the Emperor's death. The way they behaved when they saw him and the fact that he's, like, on the right side of things makes me feel like the prison's still open. I don't know what they, and this is some Big Brother shit. Like, I'm assuming that this is a combination of medical care, in quotes, and, like, systemic brainwashing, but it may be just physical changes that they have enforced in him. I don't think it can be brainwashing if Calder is able to read the actual emotions that are happening, because that's the thing with brainwashing, is that you begin to, like, believe the things you're being forced to, like, read and watch and hear. So I think if he were to read items in the room, it would match his father's apparent display of patriotism, for lack of a better word. And since they don't, it has to be, like, purely physical changes and some sort of control mechanism. I don't know if it's, like, is the Emperor controlling all of them? Is there another person who has abilities like the Emperor? Like, how do you do this to people? It feels like the kind of thing where you could implant a chip in somebody, in order to control their nerves and get them to move and speak in certain ways. You can't affect their thoughts, but you can affect what they do, how they move and what they say. I don't know. It's super creepy, though. And, like, I was worried about what they would be doing to his father, and this is so much worse than what I thought. Like, I was expecting making him into a weapon, perhaps. Like, maybe they would blackmail him into becoming somebody that works for them, or do something to him like they did to Maya, where they're, like, implanting things in him, which would be truly horrible. But there would also be a sort of, like, practical element to it. And as it is, it feels like it's simply, the aspect is just control, to be able to be like, oh, we got him to do what we said. And they could have just killed him. Why wouldn't they just kill him? Wouldn't that be easier? What's the point? What's the end game of handling it like this? I don't like it. I don't know. Anyway. So, chapter 16, the last of the three. Elsa stood on the outside of the table watching the meeting. She was meant to keep an eye on Bliss and to translate for her if she said anything particularly strange, but it was getting harder and harder to keep her peace. So, Naberius tells Calder, maybe you can go and take care of some things, buddy. We don't really need you right now. And Elsa is noticing that he's just dismissing Calder, but Calder is not upset about it at all. He just smiles and is like, of course, goodbye. And as he leaves, she starts to speak. But Bliss glares at her in a certain way and keeps her from talking. So, Naberius says, Captain Bennet, you've served us well as host. I have a couple errands for you. And we don't hear what these are because Elsa leans down to talk to Bliss. So Bliss, she asks her, like, why didn't you just tell him what we heard? And Bliss says, well, it's all implied. And she's like, it isn't. He doesn't know about that stuff. And Bliss is like, oh, okay. And she says, I will look for an opportunity to clarify then. Which she means this in like the most immediate sense. It sounds like the kind of thing somebody says when they don't really intend to put that much effort into talking to somebody, but they will if they happen to run across them. And this, it turns out like she does mean it immediately. Naberius was still talking to Cheska. The navigator didn't seem too happy. Elsa had seen her smile while throwing a man overboard, and now she was scowling. So again, I don't think that we heard what he asks her to do at all, but she doesn't like it. And Elsa asks Bliss, what about Naberius? He's clearly in thrall. And Bliss says, not yet, but close. That's worse than the old emperor. With him, he would have had a few years left, but now what? Weeks? Anyone on the throne is better than no one, Bliss said simply. If he can stall the elders for a week, that's a week we didn't have before. We can always replace him. Unless they finish the process and he's all they need. Don't be silly. Naberius isn't strong enough for that. The future emperor had fallen silent, and Cheska was missing from the room. Bliss, of course, hadn't bothered to lower her voice. The whole room had heard what she'd said. So, Naberius, at this point, dismisses Elsa. And Bliss is like, I think she should stay. And there's a little bit of a back and forth here. Because first of all, Elsa kind of wants to leave. She wants to go and talk to Calder. Secondly, Naberius wants to be obeyed and listened to. They're intending to make him emperor. He expects that they will begin to treat him as such. And it's becoming clearer and clearer to him, I think, that the fact that they are agreeing to make him emperor, in their minds, entitles them to a certain amount of sway over him, which he clearly does not intend to allow once he gets the power that he believes he is going to get. So, Elsa looks around and realizes that nobody else is leaving. And Bliss wants her there. And she says, all right, you know what? I'm going to stay. And Naberius says, load as many guards on the Testament as you can, round up the crew, and execute them. And Elsa, I wanted to say to her credit, and I'm not sure if that's actually a fair assessment. But you know what? No, I'll say it. To her credit, she doesn't freak out. Everybody is sort of uncomfortable with this. You can tell. Nobody's excited about it. But she is particularly distraught. And I wasn't sure, I'll be honest, because I haven't gotten to know Elsa that well. I wasn't sure how upset she was going to be. I didn't know how close she was to Calder at this point. Because of her reaction when Calder first meets Bliss, and how worried for Calder she appeared to be in the moments when it looks like maybe Bliss is just going to fuck up his mind. I tended to believe that she cared about him in a genuine way, but there was a part of me that was like, I don't know, you know? And here we really see this is devastating to her. And she is going to find a way to save him or help in some way. So this is when they ask, like, why are we waiting until the captain is aboard his ship? Just make it an official execution. I'm curious about this as well. Naberius says, if you plan on following my orders in the future, then this would be an excellent time to start. I don't trust Captain Bennet any more than Captain Martin. I remind you all that she is a soulbound, and we are all riding on her vessel. It seems to me she will put the pieces together when she sees us gunning down her ally. And what will she do then? Rescue their corpses? I've given her an explanation and orders that will prevent her from acting until it's too late. We can clarify afterwards. I am so curious, like, how he pictured this going. And we don't get all the way into the whole thing by the end of this chapter. So I haven't got, any alternate ending here in my head yet, because I don't know how it actually shakes out. Captain Teach glowered, or General Teach glowered at the table. I will keep Captain Bennet under control, but I don't like risking you in this. Let them sail off alone, and I will follow on my Wind Watcher. I can kill them all in a day or two. Also manages to keep it under control, and she says I must know why. He has proven repeatedly he will not follow me or my orders. I suspect he will turn on me as soon as circumstances allow. I am minimizing a risk. We don't need him. We need his ship, and I can take control of it. That's why I can't let them stay a day or two out. That ship might well pack up and swim away. Elsa looked from him to the Magister. Can he do that? He has to bond to the heart. He can't do that and take control of the testament, can he? Maxius says it's technically possible, but Naberius is so confident that Maxius is kind of like, if he says he can, then fine. But I just don't think that this makes sense. I should just pay him and let him do what we signed him up to do. Mackenzie, my friend, you have to trust me. I've spent the last 3 weeks on that man's ship. I have read every inch, every board, and I have done my best to get to know the captain. No matter what he says, no matter what he may tell himself, there is absolutely no chance that he will ever follow my leadership. He simply doesn't have an in him. I believe he thinks of himself as a rival of sorts. No, he has to go. Reluctantly, Professor Maxius nodded. I found this interesting. A rival. That is certainly not the word I would ever have chosen were I to describe the way that Calder is viewing himself in relation to Naberius. And I can't decide if this is like Naberius's interpretation just being a little bit skewed. If he's telling them what he thinks will be influential and that's all, he's just lying. Or if there's like a flavor to things that I don't pick up on because I don't have certain information. There's still some things that I don't know about in terms of what Calder's overall objectives have been from the start. And maybe that is what Naberius is sensing. So at this point, Elsa, tears well up. And Teach on her way out says, I'm sorry you were here for this, Greyweather. I will make it painless. And she goes out the door. Naberius swept out behind her without another word. So Maxius, for some reason I found this so insulting. He says, I'm very sorry. Greyweather, is it? You should not have been allowed to hear that. I don't know why the fact that he isn't even sure of her name got to me so bad, but that really did. I just, a part of me was just like, really? Really? Greyweather, is it? You don't know her name? Come on. Maybe he doesn't, but anyway. So, at this point, she realizes maybe she can go to Bliss for some help. And she goes and looks under the table. And as soon as she's wondering what Bliss is up to, I was like, oh, Bliss is gone already, I bet. And indeed, she ducks almost all the way under the table. And Bliss is gone. I like that when Maxius he tells her, I'm under orders to keep you here with me. She asks, can Bliss leave? I have no orders to the contrary. There is a vibe to that. I think that, it could be argued that he's just telling her the letter of what he was instructed. But there is a vibe to that of him looking for a reason to help her because he doesn't like this either. I don't know, though. So, "Where's Bliss?" she asked softly. Maxius looked under the table himself, and Elsa took her opportunity. This is one of those things where I have to assume it's because she is also a good reader, and she is able to hide from him what her intent was in this moment. But she jumps up, it says, lunging with one foot and kicking the dark wood of his staff out of his reach. With the other hand, she pressed the point of her sword against the underside of his chin. "I'm sorry, Professor, but I must ask you to stay here with me until my son's ship has departed." "Fair enough. I sympathize, but this is rash." So then we go to Calder and Andal. And Calder is not picking up on the signals here. I really enjoy going into Urzaya's POV later, because Urzaya is... There's only a moment, I think, because I started to, like, accidentally listen to the next chapter, and so I only got, like, the first, like, 2 sentences. But Urzaya clearly feels that some shit is up. You know, meanwhile, Calder, I think it's just he's so distracted by his grief and is so certain that they need him that it just doesn't occur to him to be worried the way that he should be worried. So he keeps rationalizing all of the other reasons why these guards might be here and not really looking at, like, some of the most obvious answers to that question. And let's see. "What's going on here, Foster? You tell me, Captain. They tried to take my guns." "Not very hard," one of the guards muttered. "Excuse me, guardsman, what is going on here?" "The future Emperor is boarding. We have to make sure this ship is secure." Andal had reached the deck by this point, and he looked no more pleased than Calder felt. And Calder didn't get any happier when the rest of the Imperial guards from the rowboat, which he had assumed were only escorts, climbed up the ladder after Andal. Calder walked over to the edge, peering down. Only a single guard remained in the boat. A figure in a red suit emerged onto the deck, accompanied by a woman in black and red armor. If Naberius was keeping the head of the Imperial Guard with him, he must be paranoid indeed. And he asks if he could go into his cabin, and they give him a little bit of guff for it, but then he's just like, "Come on, I just want to change. This jacket's super uncomfortable. Don't linger. We'll need all the crew on deck soon for an inspection." What do they expect to find? Calder wondered, shaking his head. He goes in and he opens the chest, and there's Bliss, curled up. And it's just like, what? She says, "You should invest in a more comfortable storage chest. You never know when someone might need to stow away." And when he says he doesn't like to encourage that, she asks why, and he's like, "Oh my God, I'm not doing this right now." So she explains to him about the void transmission and the likelihood that that is Jerry. "How do you know it didn't come from one of the consultants?" "Of all the guilds who might work under the influence of the elders, the consultants are among the least likely, especially on that island where they enjoy a certain protection. And they are culturally disinclined as well, according to many leading scholars on the subject." And essentially, she confirms, "I think that that is likely. I would also be interested in talking with her, should she survive." She said it innocently, but Calder made a mental note not to hand Jerry over to the Black Watch under any circumstances. He would kill her himself before it came to that. Yikes. "I would also like to visit the Grey Island," Bliss said. "I get the impression that several forces will soon converge there, and I should be present for the sake of observation. Naberius might not like it. Then again, he is not Emperor yet. Should I listen to his orders, I wonder?" And this is when Calder says, "I don't know why anyone listens to him. Why should we have him be Emperor? I don't get it." And she mentions, finally, that the other Emperor was losing his mind and that she has her suspicions he let himself be killed. There has to be a better choice. Whomever we select is going to be taken by the elders eventually, but better someone like Naberius than no one at all. Well, when she put it that way, maybe he was the best man for the job. If the throne really was a sentence of insanity and death, then the chronicler might deserve it. But he couldn't escape the thought that he was missing some crucial piece of the picture. Why did simply being in charge of the Aurelian Empire make him so vulnerable to corruption? Wouldn't it be the heart? But Bliss spoke as though the authority itself put him at risk. It surprises me that you're so concerned about Naberius' rule as emperor. I thought you'd be more worried about his plot to have you killed. I love this. It takes a minute for that to sink in, and he just says, "Please go on." Oh, that's right. You didn't know because I was going to tell you. He's going to call you and your entire crew on deck where he will have you executed. He seems to think he's preventing an eventual rebellion. You should invest in some nice soft sheets. A good night's sleep is healthy for the human body. Bliss, you spooky bitch. What is your deal? Oh my God. You know what? I can be like this when I'm stoned. I'll say something that's like wildly inappropriate in comparison to the next sentence, like they don't go together at all. She's just a little like, there's like a bit of ADD happening where she just completely loses track of one subject and jumps to another without realizing how much she is leaving other people at a loss. So, the Imperial Guard rapped on the door again and tells him to come out. And he says, it would go very smoothly if we had your help. She considered that for a moment. That's possible. Well then, farewell until I see you again, Calder Martin. She opened the chest again and started to climb in. Bliss, please tell me you're going to take care of this. Bliss. Guildhead. Please answer me. She put a finger over her lips, signaling silence, and then pulled the lid of the chest shut. Don't care for that. I mean, maybe she'll do something from inside the chest. What do I know? Maybe she'll pop out at an opportune moment. She says, I can sense that forces are going to be converging on the Grey Island, so she has some sort of, like, second sight. I don't know how clear it is. You know, it feels vague from the way she talks, but she's vague. So it may be much clearer than I'm giving credit for, and it's just the way she describes it that is vague. Whatever the case, though, I am very interested to see what happens next. So I'm excited. I don't know. Like, I assume Naberius is still alive by the end of this book. I can't really remember if he's brought up at the end of the last book at all. But maybe he is. I can't remember. Let's see. Evil is in the chat. I'm sorry, Evil. I didn't even see after your first hi. They probably practice Mira's procedure on the prisoners. Maybe. Why risk their trainees when they're prisoners to practice on? Yeah, it's just like it. Why let Calder see him at all? Why make him docile like this? Just torture him in private and kill him and be like he was executed for his crimes. Like, just there's a lot going on here that I'm not understanding the purpose behind it beyond just wanting the control over people, which granted is certainly a motivating factor in a lot of governments, and that's enough for them. So maybe that's all it is. Evil says scared straight. Maybe? I don't know. But I have to wrap. So thank you again very much to George for commissioning this. Guys, I don't know how many of you saw, but November is the next Cradle book. It's dropping. I am booked until January. So I won't be able to nobody has commissioned it yet. I don't know if Andy is going to. But if anybody wants to get in touch about that, because it's already going to kill me to have to wait 2 months from it coming out to read it. But if anybody wants to get in touch, and Andy, if you're listening to this, what's up? And yeah, I am really excited. I can't believe another one's coming out so soon. This guy is a maniac. All right, guys. I will see you on Friday. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.